everyone, welcome to Hindsight Rewrites, where we dive into some B movies or lesser known movies, change a little this, change a little that, just have some fun with them. If you'd like a overview of the criteria that I'm using on these rewrites, go check out the intro video, it's on the channel, and then come on back and we'll get to today's rewrite. Today's rewrite is for The Last Sect, a Canadian production made by Peace Arch Entertainment Group. A couple of their notable projects are The Tudors TV show, starring Jonathan Rhys-Meyers as Henry VIII, and a fun little movie I've seen a few times on a number of streaming services called The Babysitters with John Leguizamo. The film stars the late David Carradine, who's notable for his roles in the Kung Fu TV series and the Kill Bill films. The Last Sect is one of, I hope to be many, or at least a few, vampire films that I'll be covering on the Hindsight Rewrites. I enjoy the vampire genre. I just like seeing different spins on the lore, and this movie in particular has a unique spin that you don't see very often, and then I'm hoping to add a little bit more to that as well. Honestly, I've not actually watched a lot of reviews for this film. I've mostly just watched the film itself multiple times on various streaming platforms, wherever I could find it. But I did run across this review from Water Cooler Films that I enjoyed. It's part of one of their Halloween series, so I'll leave a link to that. Go check them out, and then we'll get to our rewrite. So as always, we're going to start with our poster. Now this one has two main posters that'll pop up when you're either searching to buy it or to stream it. I don't mind either of them. I actually enjoy the imagery on that first one, the one on the left. But just like we did with the Pod People poster, even though I enjoyed and liked that one, we play with it a little bit anyway. So here we have a very similar image to that poster from the left. We just didn't have the bite marks on the neck, and we're putting that red moon in behind there and tinting the red a little bit, and that's just to play into some elements that we're going to be putting into the film later on. So right off the bat, we're running into our thumbs down guy, and that's because he doesn't like the cold open, and neither do I. So you start with this map of the United States, which is like locating the movie, but I'd rather have the movie located in where it was filmed, which is Canada. So we get rid of that map, and then as far as the rest of the cold open goes, it is the professor sitting in his office playing some music, and you got the door knocking, and his assistant comes in, and nothing really gets accomplished. All the assistant does when he comes in is like, hey, I found something, and then we jump to our opening credits. So we're going to be getting rid of this cold open because it doesn't really do anything for establishing what's going on. So I'm going to be trying something new with this rewrite, which is pulling some audio from the film and putting it in the rewrite a few places here and there where I think maybe it'll be good. Again, not everywhere, but once in a while y'all get a break from my voice with some audio. So we're going to start that with a little bit of audio from that scene that we just got done cutting from that cold open. So we open our rewrite officially with the production logos, and then that will roll into this establishing shot with this text that scrolls in like a typewriter. I enjoy that quite a bit, so we're going to keep that. And it's just establishing our protagonist, Sydney's office. So we start with Sydney sitting at her desk. She works at a magazine, but they don't really specify what the name of the magazine is, and we're not going to either. It's not really that important. And she's finishing up some work on an article when she's approached by her boss, Luke. So they start out with a little small talk back and forth, hey, how's it going type stuff. Then he tells her that he's got a new assignment and that he'd like her to write a piece on a dating service that's fairly new but starting to really gain some traction and popularity with their readers. So Sydney is none too happy about having to write what she deems a fluff piece on another unnecessary dating service. Luke keeps insisting that this one is different and it's going to be really good for their magazine. She puts two and two together, saying, sure, really good is in they're pumping a bunch of ad money into the magazine. So Luke is not very happy about being called out on the BS about the ad money. So he just kind of grunts and he's like, just do the article. Everything you need's in an email I sent you. You have an interview with the CEO in a couple days. I suggest you get started. Sydney lets out a frustrated sigh, turns and opens the email that Luke mentioned. That reveals an image for the dating service called Artemis. We hold on the image and that fades us into our opening credits. As for the credits themselves, it's a mix between some still images and a bit of animation. Very stylized. I like it actually. And it's all over top of a kind of catchy tune called Cut Across the Land by the Duke Spirit. I will actually leave a link to what I believe is their music video for that song in the description. So yeah, we're not going to be messing with the credits today. So from the credits, we'll get to this exterior establishing shot of Sydney's apartment. Once again, has that stylized typing type text that tells you where we're at. Then we cut to inside where Sydney and her photographer for the interview, Sam, are getting ready to kind of head out to that interview that was mentioned in the cold open with the Artemis CEO. So the two have some banter back and forth that establishes kind of a big sister, little brother type relationship. Even though they're not related, that's kind of the dynamic that they have. He's asking why they're having an interview in the middle of the night, and Sydney reminds him that it's only like 8:30. So she is continuing to get ready and asks him if he got the email she sent so that he could have his photos lined up and what she wants him to be taking while she's doing the interview. He's like, no, I didn't open that. And she asks, why not? And he's like, well, if you want me to open an email, I have to at least have a prospect of seeing boobs. Now, this is from the original movie, and I actually like it because it's kind of establishing his character as kind of this, he's young and he wants to see boobs and this. I don't think it's hers specifically that he wants to see. I think he's just being a smartass. So here we got our thumbs down guy, and that's because they have this whole plot line in the original movie for the vampire web, they call it, which is something that Sam watches, and it's the ladies from the sect, and they're on camera basically feeding, but everybody thinks it's like a show. But I just don't like it. I think they're coming out into the open a little bit more out of desperation for their situation, which we'll get into later. But that's with the dating service. I really don't think that they would want to get on camera and just a little more exposed like that. So we're going to avoid the whole vampire web arc. One of the main functions of the vampire web scenes was to establish Sam's character as a bit of a perv, but we can do that with other means, as you can see here. Instead of watching the vampire web, he's just watching, whether it's pictures or video, whatever, some adult content on Sydney's computer while she's still getting ready. Ready to go, Sydney comes over to get Sam, who is still fixated on his adult content, and she is just none too happy that he's watching that kind of stuff on her computer. She's like, come on, get your nose out of that smut and let's get going. He is fully locked in, fully distracted by his content, and she comes up next to him and she is just grossed out and eventually just turns the computer off and tells him to get his ass moving, or she's going to tell Luke and get his ass fired. A common theme in the original, and we're going to have in our version as well, is just Sam constantly bagging on Sydney for being what he deems a prude or doesn't like to have fun, and he tells her as much when he's getting his coat on. So Sam gets a kick out of Sydney calling him a sick, degenerate pervert, as they have a little bit of a stare-off there. He embraces that part of himself, so they stare a bit more, and then eventually head out for the interview. From Sydney and Sam, we cut to this establishing shot of what they call Van Helsing's residence, and you can see our guy over there, our thumbs down guy in the corner, and that is because I do not like the inclusion of the Van Helsing character in this film. Not everything vampire has to have, him or Dracula or anything from Stoker's in it. Instead, there are plenty of other works, plenty of other spins. As I mentioned before, I like different spins. sometimes. So we're still going to have that character. He's still going to be, David Carradine. That's the one he plays. Uh, so we'll still be in it, and we're not cutting him out. We're just going to call him the Professor, kind of like the Doctor, but instead he's going to be the Professor because there are plenty of other vampire hunters, and this Professor is one of them. So from that establishing, we will come inside of the residence here, where we pick up a scene that we pulled from that cold open, which is the Professor playing some music and the door being knocked on by his assistant. Eventually the Professor stops playing and he yells for the assistant to come in. In the original, the assistant is all like jittery and hyper, and he still can be that, but he's that way in the original because he's like already kind of solved the puzzle basically, because again he's referencing that vampire level. We took that out of there. We're going to make these guys actually work for figuring out what's going on with the vampires, at least a little bit more than they did in the original. So the assistant, who's referred to as Tome, I don't know if it was supposed to be Tom, but they call him Tome a few different times, so we'll go with that. He has been summoned there by the Professor to help him with a special project. So after they exchange some pleasantries and Tome gets the Professor some tea, they begin discussing their purpose there, which is to hunt down these vampires who the Professor has been tracking for a number of years, and he finally thinks maybe he's got them a little bit narrowed down and he needs the assistant's help to finally zero in on them. We cut to an establishing of the Artemis building, and then from there we go into the building where Sam and Sydney are walking down the hall towards a intercom type video system where they are greeted by a woman on the screen.
Good evening. How may I help you?
Hi. I'm Sydney St. James. This is Sam Francis.
Hey, how you doing?
We're from the magazine.
Of course. I'm afraid Anna's running a bit late. Have a seat, and I'll call you the minute she's ready.
The screen goes back to a default image of Artemis, and it is revealed that Sam and Sydney are being watched on black and white security footage, and the one watching that footage turns out to be the first reveal of our vampire leader / CEO, Anna. While they're sitting there waiting for the interview, they continue to banter back and forth about their topic from the apartment, and Sam just keeps prying about Sydney's dating life.
God, are you ever boring, man? You know what? It's like you got some kind of... I don't know, man. You're screwed up. You're like a fucking nun or something.
That's nice. You kiss your mother with that mouth?
Yeah, and you know what? Whatever this condition is, it forbids you from having fun.
I know how to have fun. Thank you.
Right, yeah. When's the last time you got laid?
I'm gonna pretend I didn't hear that.
Yeah. You know what? I bet you don't even remember. You know what? Come on. Tell me.
Sam, just
Seriously,
shut up.
be honest with me. When was the last time you
No,
got
really,
laid?
just shut your mouth.
Oh, wait a minute. I remember.
Sam, I swear to God.
Listen, what was that dude's name? He had the little thing here. Pablo.
His name was not...
His name was Pablo.
Pablo.
His name was Pablo Cannelloni or Margot Rigatoni or something like that, right? Right? That was what, 3 or 4 years ago?
Sydney and Sam continue to be monitored on the security system by Anna, who is watching and listening to their conversation intently. A close-up on her dissolves to a close-up of a vampire skull at the Professor's place. And in the original, the assistant, Tome, is on board or believes in vampires and everything, and that's fine. We can have that with this more mentor teacher relationship between the two, but they also reference like a larger network of hunters or people that track the vampire movements. We're not going to have that. This is just a small group. These two and another person we'll find later, and that's about it, based on the Professor's kind of family legacy. The Professor informs Tome that he has tracked the vampires to this city, but he has ran into that proverbial dead end with traditional methods, with the libraries and the archives and things like that. So he wants Tome to use newer technology like the internet to help expedite the search while they still have a window to stop the sect. When Tome pushes him about what he means by that, the professor is a little vague. He just says, let's find him first. I'll explain the rest of it later. We cut back to the security footage of Sam and Sydney, again watched by Anna intently. She then uses what I'm going to call some sort of mental type power to screw with Sam a little bit, throw in some images in his head and maybe even some voices or noises. Sam looks to see what's going on, and he's just very confused there. Then all of a sudden we get this reddish tint, and he looks back and Sydney's gone. After seeing that Sydney's gone, he looks back the other direction again, this time seeing a beautiful woman. He gets up and they have this little dance back and forth where she's kind of seducing him. It's all clearly in his head, which is why we have this reddish tint. And suddenly we snap back to reality. Sydney is clearly talking, but Sam is still in a bit of a fog from his little fantasy. And before he can really get his bearings, a woman exits one of the doors, and it turns out to be the same woman from his fantasy. Before Sam can do much else about it, the receptionist comes back on to the intercom screen and tells them that Anna is ready for the interview. When Sam and Sydney get up to go to Anna's office, Sam sees a quick flash of the same vampiric images he had in his mind earlier on the screen. When he says something to Sydney, she thinks he's just, drunk or high or something. She's like, get your shit together and let's go. So we get this painting that appears multiple times throughout the film, which I believe is meant to represent the vessel, which Sydney's supposed to be. Now we're going to keep the whole vessel thing, but we're going to do it a little bit different. I'm not really a big fan of this whole painting situation, so we're going to cut that, but we are keeping the whole vessel thing, which we'll get into more in a bit. So Anna is on the phone when Sydney and Sam get to the office. She's speaking Russian in the original film, but we're going more a Greek route with the vampire origins, so she can either be speaking that or English or French since they are in Canada. In any event, when she sees Sydney, she gets this look on her face like you get when you've been looking for someone or something for a long time and you finally have found it. Anna gets up to greet her guest, Sam first. Then when she reaches out to shake Sydney's hand, Sydney gets like this quasi-vision of two women kissing, kind of half-blurred, shown in this dissolve here. She's just really dazed by it. Anna asks if she's okay. Sydney is again just kind of in a bit of a haze, similar to how Sam was after his little vision, and she kind of half shakes it off and slowly parts the handshake. Sydney is a little more clear-headed with the handshake gone, but she's still quite foggy and now locked into Anna's gaze, who kind of draws her in almost hypnotically. And it's eventually Sam that breaks that by beginning to ask questions about the office and saying that he shot here once before when it was owned by someone else. And this allows for Sydney to eventually kind of break free, or mostly break free, from that little semi-trance that she was in. Anna sits down and asks if the two are ready for the interview to begin. Sydney is still in a bit of a fog, bit of a haze from the handshake encounter. Sam has to pull her out of it with a tap on the shoulder. Now fully or mostly back to her faculties, Sydney pulls out a tape recorder, asks if it's okay to do that. Anna says yes, it's fine, and we get a transition to the Artemis image on a computer. Half glancing to the computer from his own research, his own papers, the professor sees the Artemis image and he asks his assistant what it is. Tone tells him, oh, it's just a dating service that popped up when I put in some of your keywords. It's no big deal. But the professor, he takes another quick look at it and he insists, it could be something. And Tome asks, why? Well, because Artemis is the goddess that the sect worships.
So what led you to believe the world needed another internet dating service?
We find the traditional paradigm is rather male-oriented. Our goal is to level the playing field.
I see.
Membership is divided into relationship and intimate encounters. Each category has its own features, and each caters to the specific desires of our members. I'll use dating as an example.
Okay.
Let's say that you and Sam go out on a date. You would be asked to fill out a questionnaire, such as, did Sam pay?
Yeah, in her dreams.
How were his manners? Did he drink? If so, how much? That sort of thing.
What about sex? Do your members relate whether the man was good in bed? That sort of thing?
Of course.
Do men get to do the same? Post information on the women they meet?
No.
Before Sydney gets a chance to follow up on that, Anna gets a phone call and has to take it in the other room. When she's gone, Sydney asks Sam what she thinks of her. Sam's like, what do you mean? And Sydney says, oh, I think she's a bit odd. Sam's like, no, I think she's hot. He says that while he's taking pictures of Anna as she's returning from the phone call. Anna sits back down, and in similar fashion to when she did so earlier, she leans forward and gets Sydney kind of in that half foggy, half trance-ish state again, while saying, so, you were saying? Sydney, again, is just losing her words for a minute there, and then eventually finds herself and follows up with asking Anna whether doing that for women but not for men, with the note comparing, is sexist. Anna says that, yeah, it probably is, but none of the men have complained, and she continues on by asking Sam if he would mind something like that. He finds himself distracted when flipping through images on his computer from the interview, and he's getting some flashes of the vampiric images like he did before. He has to be pulled out of it, and he responds, no, I wouldn't mind at all. Sydney says it's because he's weird or an egomaniac. Anna concedes that it is a function of ego, but at Artemis they like to lean into natural gender inclinations, and that just seems to help with the entire process. Sydney then thanks her for her time, and while Sam is getting his gear together, Sydney and Anna go to shake hands again. This time when Anna extends her hand, Sydney looks down at it, almost wanting to get that same experience as before. She gets a little twinge of it, but nothing to the extent from earlier. Anna then thanks him again, and they turn to leave. However, when they're about to the door, Anna calls out for Sydney. Sydney turns, and Anna gives her a brochure for Artemis, says, you should give it a try. Sydney politely thanks Anna again for her time, and she and Sam head out. That dissolves into the professor's home yet again. The professor is rummaging through a cabinet that's filled with various weapons and things like that, traditional stuff you'd find with vampire killing or hunting. Tom is asking him what he's looking for. The professor finally pulls out a box, and he turns and he comes back to the desk, puts it down. He says, this is exactly what we need. Tom says, what is it? The professor opens the box and showing this little small cube relic with like a stone in the top of it. In the original, this is a section of the film where Sydney gets like a tarot reading from a psychic, and that leads to like the psychic getting freaked out when she reads her palm or the cards. We're just going to avoid that altogether. It's just being cut. And I don't even think we're reutilizing the psychic actress. It's just, I find it just disjoining, and I'm not a fan. So instead, we'll get a cut from the relic that the professor pulled out, and we'll cut to this here, which is Sydney's apartment and her friend Jess, and they're just discussing how the interview went and things like that. And Sydney tells her that she has been thinking about something for a while.
Hey, what's up? You all right? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I've just been in a little bit of a rut lately. Yeah. I'm thinking about quitting. Quitting what? Work? What? But you love what you do. Yeah, well, after 8 years of bullshit like this Artemis article, I don't know anymore.
From there, we will cut back to the professor's residence, where we got a close-up of the relic.
Can you at least tell me what its primary function is?
It's a vampire monitor. It's intended to measure the strength of the sect's power.
Back at Sydney's, Jess has just left, and Sydney is just wore out from the day, everything that's been going on, the interview, and just mulling over quitting her job, all the rest of it. So she gets down on a couch and just starts drinking a little bit, and eventually picks up the brochure that Anna gave her and begins to carefully and intently read it, almost as intently as she was looking at Anna when they were shaking hands. That transitions back to the professor and Tome, where the professor has finally decided to tell Tome the history, or the history as he knows it, of vampires. So the professor begins to tell the tale, and we get a fade to ancient Greece. Now, when it comes to this flashback, I'm going to get some inspiration from some other movies I've seen where they use like comic stills or art or like pictures from a storybook to tell like a flashback type thing, and thus not needing extra actors. They can just use, in this case, stock images or whatever, and voiceover from the main actor, in this case the professor, telling what's going on. So that's the route we're going here. So this whole flashback, even in a full-on movie, would be like some sort of still, whether that's from a book or comic or whatever. In this case, we just have some images from stock. So the professor begins by setting the stage in ancient Greece and telling Tome about how Zeus was a very, frisky fella, and was constantly cheating on his goddess wife, Hera, and going down to earth and just doing kind of some just whatever he wanted, basically, and that really pissed Hera off. Now Hera, the goddess of women, was not overly fond of her husband cheating, but she also wasn't fond of how he and the other male gods would go down and just kind of do whatever the hell they wanted to these mortal women. Yes, Hera would punish some of the mortal women, especially the ones that consensually got with Zeus, but some of the other ones were more victims than anything else, and she started to finally realize that. So she decided to do something about it. Now I know there's going to be some ancient Greek aficionados that are experts in the gods and things like that that are be like, you're not doing quite what they're... Well, we're doing a spin. All this is fiction, and we're taking bits and pieces here and there. We're using some factual, I guess, things from the actual ancient Greek god lore, but we're kind of spinning them to fit our story a little bit as well. So as the goddess of women, Hera was none too happy about Zeus and the other gods, the male gods, making their own mark on the world, peppering the world with their Herculeses. So she decided to team with daughters of Zeus. One of those daughters was one from herself and Zeus, Hebe, the goddess of youth. The other two, Persephone, who Zeus had with Demeter, was the goddess of the underworld, having taken that over from Hades. And the other, Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, who Zeus had with Leto. Determined to make their own mark on the world, as well as protect the women of the mortal world from the male gods, as well as just males in general, the four of them got together and combined their powers, as well as some power that, let's say, Hera borrowed from Zeus, and in tandem with some mystical elements that they could get from the blood moon, they bestowed these powers on four mortals, more specifically their four most loyal servants or disciples for each goddess, Hera and Persephone and Hebe and Artemis. The mixture of the powers given to them by these goddesses gave these disciples, these women, the more traditional vampire type traits or powers that we know now. Despite all of them having the same powers from the combined efforts of those goddesses, the four of them still split into sects that were based on the goddess that they most worshipped, Persephone, Hera, Hebe, and Artemis. The four sects scattered across the globe, and over the centuries they have ruled and done as they please, but eventually they started to fade away and die off, whether that was from hunters or the lack of finding a vessel, which we're going to get into here in a bit. But eventually, only one sect remains, and that is the sect of Artemis. So like Birdemic, I'm going to be splitting this rewrite in half so we don't end up with that hour long like we had with the pod people. I'm also going to be reserving a lot of my final thoughts until the end of part 2, but I'm going to do a quick little rundown of part 1 so far. So a lot of the criticisms that I see of this film, especially in like some written reviews like on IMDb or on Amazon, is that it is really slow. And they're not wrong. This front half especially is a little slower, but not every movie or every vampire movie has to be freaking Underworld where they're all running around, killing lichens or each other or whatever. So I don't mind a little bit of a slower pace, and obviously we added in some things as well to kind of help balance that out. We're going to be getting some action in the back end, and I like where we're at, where we built on some lore as well as got our characters into the positions that we want them moving forward. So as always, just please like, comment, subscribe. It really helps us out to grow the channel. Check out the Patreon if you'd like. If not, that is fine as well. And I will see you all next time on Hindsight Rewrites.